When it comes to Season 4, I'd like to say I was surprised with how polarizing the episodes are. Nearly every episode, amongst the dozens of Skype friends I talk to, there are two kinds of people that I wake up to find. Those who like the episode, and those who hate it with barely any middle ground. Needless to say, I'm pretty tired of arguing, so I figured the next best thing was to do analysis with another fellow writer.
That's me. Welcome to In Retrospect, an analysis series by ABagOVicodin and myself, Alexstrazsa. Our goal with this series is to address some of the main criticisms aimed towards episodes and discuss them. We've picked a perfect episode to analyze this time around, and we hope that you'll enjoy our journey. So let's dive into our first exhibit, Bats.
Or what's known as the Flutter Bat episode. The opening scene of this episode was definitely strong. Within the first 40 seconds, the episode has managed to convey that Applejack already knows about the fruit bats and has past experience with them. It's a great opening because by using the right and especially simple dialogue and visuals, they've given us all the information we need to infer who the antagonists are and what the episode will be about. You hear bats, you see the huge shadow, there's a large amount of bats, and they've been there before. Boom, done, opening song.
Also, we get this amazing scene. There's really nothing quite like that. It's just so ridiculous and cheesy that you can't help but love it. And moving on, we're introduced to Applejack's Blue Ribbon Apple, and if the Chekhov's gun trope has taught me anything, it's that this apple is going to be important. After that, the episode leads into this discussion with Applejack and Fluttershy, and for the most part, we're rooting for Applejack.
Debatably. In this scene, we have to take Applejack's word for it that the bats are as terrible as she says, but we'll get to that later.
She clearly has experience with the bats and knows what they're capable of, while Fluttershy merely believes that she can talk them out of it. To be fair, Fluttershy has really experience with animal care, so it's not too far-fetched to think she can communicate with the bats.
Yeah, but the part that bothers me is that Fluttershy was essentially taking a shot in the dark over whether or not she was actually going to be useful. She admitted that she had no experience with these bats, but previously was like, oh, I can handle it. That's pretty ballsy, especially when Fluttershy fails to convince the bats. It was an understandable try, and I would have probably done it were I in her shoes. It just doesn't help that it failed considering their predicament.
I'm pretty sure that if this wasn't a show tailored towards children, Applejack would have been far more upset with Fluttershy's insistence in saving the bats before the orchard. Just like Applejack said.
Listen, Fluttershy, that sounds real nice and all, but every second we spend building this so-called sanctuary is a second they'll spend destroying orchard.
Afterwards, we get the Bats song. It's this weird Danny Elfman sounding thing that could fit right at home with Beetlejuice or The Nightmare Before Christmas. This is arguably the most contested part of the entire episode, and I can understand why. Now, me, I love it. This song is incredibly catchy and is definitely composed well. I love the way it sounds, and I love the theme, but what I don't love is the portrayal of the characters here. By the time it's over, Applejack looks like she's gonna nearly beat up Fluttershy for her opinion with her body language, and the rest of the main six aren't really helping the mood.
That could be the point, though. Maybe it's designed to make the audience realize that Applejack is in the wrong. The way the tone and the visuals of the song are set up, AJ is very clearly painted as the antagonist, to the point where Fluttershy is curled up in terror by the end of it. When you take the target audience into consideration, you can see how easy it is to view Applejack as the bad guy.
But did we really need that, per se? Like, actually need Applejack to be this ham-handed on her hatred of the fruit bats? It's understandable since she's the most stubborn one of the group when it comes to her beliefs, but it spreads to the rest of the cast too. Really, what bothers me the most about this is that the other characters weren't necessary. There are other episodes where the ensemble cast was definitely used well, but this is not the case. The song only needed to have Applejack and Fluttershy singing, and the others could have said their more characterized piece after or during the song. Sure, it sounds cooler, but they sacrificed some character to improve the music, and I'm not really a fan of that.
Not always the best of trade-offs, especially when characterization is such a highly praised part of the show. By the time the first act finishes, the action is back on Fluttershy, and you can almost forget how much of a jerk Applejack was. Then, we get an interesting bit of peer pressure as Fluttershy is being asked to use her special stare to deprive the bats of what makes them unique.
Which is another red flag, but we'll get into that later.
Now, this part is pretty important. It becomes fairly evident what the moral of the story is going to be, and that's fittingly illustrated by just how uncomfortable Fluttershy is, and how pushy the rest of them are.
We're treated to a cool rarity scene, with her in an awesome freaking suit by the way, and a bunch of subtle animation consistencies like the bat slurping up the apples and spitting out the seeds, and Dash taking care of a runaway. It's just little animations like this that make the whole environment feel alive.
Jan Animations is pretty good at this as well. Usually in his animations, there's always that one item that's animated along with the characters. You know, Button Mash's hat, for example. By having just those few extra frames, the animation and storyboarding teams really add life to parts of the scene that otherwise didn't need to be animated. It's the little things that count.
Once all that is taken care of, things seem to be going smoothly. Fluttershy does her stare, the bats stop eating the apples, and wait a minute.
Is that...
Did they just... Flutterbat? Okay, alright, let's just get the gushing out of the way. Oh my god, she's so freaking cute! Look at her little ears and her cute red eyes and that adorable cutie mark, and oh my god, those fangs. She can suck my blood any day of the week. I want my DNA inside her. The blood kind. You know the blood DNA?
You okay over there?
Just give me a second. Can you just, 30 seconds, I swear.
Oh god. Well, let's just continue. Now, I'm a bit torn on Merryweather's decision to turn Fluttershy into a bat thing. I mean, she's not technically a bat pony, because the only thing that was transferred according to Twilight was the desire to be a fruit bat, which is kind of insane once you think about it. The mere desire to be a fruit bat completely changed Fluttershy, from cutie mark to wings, ears, fangs, the whole shebang. It was like that one spell completely changed her destiny to be a fruit bat, and that's freaking interesting.
But I'd like to say that Merryweather has some inconsistent respect for the characters, because Merrywell is something we don't talk about.
I thought I had 30 seconds.
I can multitask, don't judge me.
We're doing Merrywell, he just doesn't know it yet. Anyway, Merriweather Williams has had her problems with characterization, but this isn't the case of every episode she's done. She wrote Wonderbolt Academy, which is a freaking awesome episode, possibly a better ending, that uses essentially Rainbow Dash's character from before the show in Season 1, but turned up to 11 in order to be a type of foil character for her. Lightning Dust was an excellent antagonist for Rainbow Dash because Lightning Dust was essentially Rainbow Dash before she made friends, so Rainbow's morals after she got friends was the main focus of that episode.
While it remains in the realm of headcanon, and this is completely debatable, there is something to be said for the fact that if Rainbow didn't have friends, she might have possibly stepped on a significant amount of ponies in order to get where she is in the show. Sure, she had Fluttershy and Gilda as actual friends, but with Rainbow's personality, Gilda would have probably put a better impression on Rainbow than Fluttershy. Because of that, Rainbow would have possibly grown up as a tool and her destiny could have changed. Either way, let's go out of the realm of headcanon. Back in Bats, Applejack's stubbornness is cranked up to 11, and all of Twilight's lessons were thrown out the window for the sake of a song. Rarity's whole position on the Bats is better summed up with that one lady from Tom and Jerry that screams whenever she sees Jerry. Rainbow Dash is only in it for the cider, and Fluttershy, well, she's Fluttershy.
Vampire Fruit Bat Fluttershy, though. Did it need to happen?
Probably not.
But did it turn out to be an awesome thing to happen?
Well, it depends. Go to Derpy Boo and search Fluttershy and Bat Pony. Tell me how many results you get. I'll be waiting. Until then, let's try and figure out the logistics behind this decision. The way I see it, it was one of two things. One, Merriweather is mimicking her inconsistent characterization when compared to the other writers that she has for the characters by turning Fluttershy into a bat pony instead of having an actual conversation between Fluttershy and Applejack over the bats. While I believe that would have been hard to shove debate about the environment into a children's show, that doesn't mean that it's impossible. I mean, sure, switching moral ideologies isn't exactly fodder for an interesting episode, but certainly there had to be some sort of middle ground that avoided dropping actual focus on Applejack's short-sighted solution, and just pulling Flutterbat for no other reason than to tell Applejack, how would you feel if one of your own kind was robbed of what they were and changed to what others wanted, considering that's what the other 5 wanted to do to the bats?
Of course, there's also the possibility that Applejack was overreacting and giving them less time than they actually had, which was probably at least remotely true, but her concerns were completely legitimate. This brings us to our second bit of reasoning, but it's not one I think is the case. Simply put, pandering. Really, the only way I can see this being the reasoning is if Megan McCarthy specifically told Merriweather to transform Fluttershy. It's possible when you think about the story meetings that the writers have and what goes on in Megan's Twitter account. But let's keep in mind that these episodes are written at least a year before they come out. Unless bat ponies were a popular thing in December 2012, I think we can safely debunk any notions of pandering.
Exactly. Moving on. Twilight has the right idea with gathering all of the bats in the same place, however her learning from the previous seasons is brought into question. They made friends out of discord, the embodiment of chaos, and yet she was the one who suggested taking away the fruit bat's livelihood instead of trying to make friends? Isn't this basically Keep Calm and Flutter On but with fruit bats?
When you put it that way, yeah it is. They have to trust Fluttershy's judgment over their own despite all signs pointing at Fluttershy being wrong. They use peer pressure to force Fluttershy into doing something that's harmful to the party that isn't them, and then they end up being wrong and apologizing.
So why bring in a completely different moral with Fluttershy's use of the stare? Wouldn't that have worked better as its own episode? It's like taking a spoonful of butter and spreading it on a whole loaf versus one slice of bread. The flavor is thinner when both morals have to take up space in the same running time.
However, there are two good points that I feel we should bring up. A, these morals worked well in the episode. Neither felt like they were shoved into the narrative, because even if Flutterbat didn't happen, then both morals would have still been addressed. Both morals had nothing to do with Flutterbat, they were just more or less solved with it.
And B, Fluttershy's moral has essentially been explored in bits throughout the series. Her moral was the ability to say no to your friends without having any sort of fear or peer pressure affect her. For example, she said no in Dragonshy, but that was because she was scared of the dragon. She said no in putting your hoof down, but that was because she was Flutterbitch Part 2. And Green Isn't Your Color helped Fluttershy learn to say no in practically the same scenario as this episode. So exploring Fluttershy's moral in depth in a separate episode could have possibly felt redundant.
Now, before we move on, let's just go over something. Ever since the both of us began writing fanfiction, we've begun to see the show in two different ways. We see the show both as a fan and as a writer.
There are episodes that have writing which can be questionable at best and terrible at worst, but moments where the fan in us comes in are moments that make us both grateful.
We can talk about inconsistent characterization until the cows come home, but what matters to both of us is what the episode offers to us individually, and I bet the same applies to you. I have a feeling we're both going to talk about our double viewpoints in a separate video, but let's summarize with this fact.
While we spent a good amount of the video talking down about supposedly bad things that might not be such a big deal to others, I feel that explaining the bad is easier than explaining the good, and that's one of the reasons why Alex and I started this series in the first place.
It's extremely easy to point at Games 20's player, Mysterious Mare-do-Well, and say what's bad about it. Not because the episode might be completely bad, but your mileage may vary on that, but because cynicism is easy. Optimism is the energy to look at something and think, but not necessarily believe, that it could be good or that the future could be good. Optimism takes effort, energy, and willpower.
Jace O'Neill, an American author, once said that cynicism places the cynic at the center seat of judgment, with the self-appointed authority to criticize and condemn. While Alex and I are a fan of this seat from time to time, we'd rather go to IKEA and get a more comfortable one that isn't bare, cold, and worn by the asses of the lazy.
With that being said, let's slip into our comfy chair. The few questions we could ask is what makes this episode appeal to us as both writers and fans. Well, the dialogue of the episode flows beautifully, minus a few hiccups such as Spike's attempt to be an actual character, so some of the lines ended up being a bit detrimental to the characterization.
Pinkie is especially written well if you ignore her bit in the Bat song and chalk it up to being in the moment of the song, which Rarity hinted at with her immediate apology at the end.
They had a great opportunity to do another meta joke, just like in Rarity Takes Manhattan. Just a little, sorry Fluttershy, every pony was singing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Another upside to the episode is the visuals, as usual. The glowing apple scene was a great effect, and the entire nighttime Flutterbat scene was excellently done. The mood was foreboding and then exciting until the final Flutterbat reveal, even if part of the mood was given away due to her fangs growing in. A lot of the scenes here were great looking, and it's definitely one of the episode's strong points.
And let's not forget that complete Iron Man exclamation Twilight dished out to cover the fruit bats. That magic grid was awesome. Moving away from the visuals, the morals fit in perfectly through the episode, considering the problem wasn't the bats. In Applejack's point of view, the problem was the bats, but what was the solution for them? The apathetic removal of essentially what makes the vampire fruit bat species.
While we may be looking a bit too into it, a different viewpoint could argue that the main cast, minus Fluttershy, was the problem in this episode. Not in the, well, obviously they started the problem kind of way, but the way of which they get around things that seem to act unharmonious or inconvenient to their interests. Complete manipulation of what they want. Keep calm and Flutter on, anyone? Just some food for thought. Last but not least, we got another episode, and another burst of inspiration for the fandom, which is definitely a good thing. Although we might cover the show's position in, quote, pandering to the fandom later on.
And then, of course, there are the throwbacks and continuity quips. It's always great to see the writers actually remembering past episodes.
Fruit bat roundup, fruit bat roundup!
How is that not amazing, especially this far in the series? The nods make the show feel more real than what it was back in Season 1, so think about how far the show has come since then. It used to be just a slice of life series, and even the writers admitted that Hasbro wanted to tread softly when it came to giving them too long a leash with their franchise.
While there certainly has been some executive meddling, for lack of a better term, the show has evolved in ways that could debatably outlast previous 90s cartoons that we all put on a pedestal as the enlightenment of excellent writing. A good comparison would be Ed, Edd n Eddy. The show grew along with its characters from the cul-de-sac environment into a high school setting, with a movie finale that, at least I feel, perfectly ended the series. Also, it wasn't Ne'er-Do-Well. I think we could just take that and call it a day.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, what happens when we go over Ne'er-Do-Well?
I'm gonna have to use my sick days.
We don't have sick days.
Well, then I'm screwed. Anyway, I think that just about covers this segment of In Retrospect. Hopefully you've taken something from this, and if you didn't like the episode before, maybe you've reconsidered.
Don't forget to like the video if you liked it, and let us know why if you didn't. And if you have something to bring up, mention it in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Oh, and I think there's a subscribe button somewhere around here.
Hey Alex, maybe we'll get a lot of subscribers if we make an obligatory and overused joke about YouTube's layout along with an extremely annoying button that takes up nearly the entire video since we don't have anything else of importance to say.
We would, but we aren't hacks.
Oh look, a button. I don't even know how it got there. Well, if you want to see more videos like this in the future, go give that button a click. I'll point at it even though it'll probably be moved in 2 months. Nailed it!